Hello, friends, family, and keepers of the faith, to this week's blog. I usually tell you what this is. It's number 40 if we're counting, and the date for this video is the 27th of the 11th, 22. And as you know, I always have a struggle on how I'm going to start these things, but I think it's a little bit easier this week. When it comes to the weather, we've had mixed, lots of rain, some sun. But for some of us, especially my friends in America, it's Thanksgiving. Never have to forget what Thanksgiving is. I think we miss it a little bit over here in Britain. Over here we called it Harvest Festival. And I was always wary of Harvest Festival because my uncle worked on a farm and I worked with him, you know, during my teens and my early 20s, helping out a little bit. And of course I always remember him donating food to the church and the celebration. I think that was around about the 1st of October from memory. But we celebrate it in all different ways. In America, you've had yours for your long weekend. I think it was Thursday it started. Canada, I think, is more like us. I think it's in October. But Thanksgiving to me changed drastically with planes, trains and automobiles. Probably because I'm a big filmy and I like my comedies. And that was all about a guy trying to get home for Thanksgiving, and there aren't too many films that celebrate that fact. It's always, you know, for Christmas, or, you know, there's Halloween films and Valentine films. Thanksgiving and Harvest Festival rarely get mentioned in film, and the disappointment for me is that my Planes, Trains and Automobiles steelbook is trapped in this Royal Mail disruption that's going on at the moment. And good timing by the Royal Mail. They knew that Black Friday was coming along, which has just gone, by the way, but it will be on all week, I'm sure, where people are bulk buying from Amazon and everything, and depending on how that stuff is posted to us, we're waiting days and days before we get it. And so for this week, I've got very, very little to show you what's come through the post, because literally everything is all in the disruption part of things. But, you know, it is what it is. And I just want to wish my American friends the happiest of times while you rest from work. And it's a time of reflection, and we should appreciate the food that we have on our plate a little bit. I'm not that religious, but I do think sometimes of people going to food banks and all sorts of stuff, and here we are with a great big massive turkey on our tables if you are celebrating. And you know, you've got your family around you and your friends that might come and see you. You know, all power to your pen. You know, just always remember there's some people that are quite not as fortunate as that. But anyway, that's the intro. Not particularly great, but let's get to the news. And as always, I start off with the war. Remember, this is just a timestamp so that I remember the events that went on this week. And in the war, on Wednesday, Russia fired an estimated 70 cruise missiles into Ukraine and killed at least 10 people in residential zones, and one newborn baby in a hospital. 51 missiles were intercepted by air defense. Russia continued to attack power infrastructure as Ukraine passes into winter. So yes, we're getting to a stage now where they'll exploit anything to get this land back. This firing into residential zones is just an atrocity. We all want this war over. I don't know quite what NATO are doing. I hear that They're in constant talks. I don't see much on the news about people going over there and having these chats. It all seems to be by phone, I should think. Not going to get us anywhere, all of that. I think now it becomes more and more likely that talks will do nothing. And although I don't want it to go the other way either, I'm just starting to feel a little bit more creepy-fied about it all, you know, that this will end in a big battle. Let's hope not. I'd rather not have, if I ever have kiddies, looking back at history and talking about this particular area and knowing that next to nothing was being done about it. Anyway, the next one's quite disturbing as well. It's about the firefighters. Now, I read this yesterday. There's been a report that's done, an individual report. So the report states that the brigade is institutionally misogynist and racist. Independent report concluded that the service has a toxic culture. This allows bullying and abuse. Officers now face the sack after the publish of this report. We've heard so much about the police. We're now seen to be doing the same for the fire service, and we don't hear too much about them, but I know that institutionalized, when we hear that word, we're talking about particular zones of business and public services. And to be quite honest, why we just don't get on with our work, why we have to bully people, why we have to, you know, think that women can't do what men can do and all of that sort of stuff. I thought we'd moved away from, to a point where it was minor. This could be minor, I don't know, I haven't read the report, but it saddens me to think that you can go into the fire service and say it was me, and I'm quite a bulky person, that I would be picked on because of my weight, or anything really, you know, picking up on a caricature of yourself, you know, like somebody with a big mole on their face, or someone with a tooth missing, or whatever. Terrible. Just awful. And then, of course, the last one, again, another sad one, was Irene Cara. Now, I should think a lot of people will hear that name and not remember Irene Cara, but I do, just purely because, really more about my sister, because she loved the film Fame, and there was a TV series called Fame. I did see Fame, the film, and I saw the film Flashdance. She co-wrote What a Feeling and won an Oscar for that, and she died very young at the age of 63. And the more we hear about stuff from our early teens and, you know, our childhood stuff, and these people suddenly to die, it's only going to get worse. But you can go at any time. It doesn't have to be 63. 63 is still incredibly young. But what I'm trying to say is people die at in their 20s and their 30s. But it means something to us because their history is far enough back that our minds were so young that we just sort of like carry that emotion and memory with us a little bit more. So rest in peace, Irene Cara. And now we come to the shout-outs. Right, only 10 minutes in, we've got the shout-outs. And just to say thank you to everybody that does comment. It's been a weird week this week. I've not been particularly well the last 3 to 4 weeks. And this particular blog that's just gone, although possibly one of the longest, has got the least amount of comments. So that's not a fault of yours. That's something that I have to fill the void with. So for all of these people that I'm going to comment with, they've all looked at my blog, made a little comment about it, sometimes left a question, and also left a message in anything beyond my blog, you know, some of my gaming history and stuff. So big shout outs go to Martroid, Down the Rabbit Hole, Jambomb, LFC Gamer, Milfy Swimbuckle, Rocket Bunny, Steve's Gaming, and then for outside of the blog, Cauldron of Stardust, Denny, and Ponder. So, you know, basically, I've already said last week that time is a commodity that you can't give back. Once time has gone, that's it, you know. And if somebody takes their time to watch what I consider to me just waffling on and talking about rubbish and stuff that's gone on in the week, thank you, you know, because for me, it's a sort of a therapy thing. You know, I look at my camera up there and I go, you're my audience. I'm dictating things in my head in real time, and remembering things this week, and what your questions do and your comments is make me think further back. And some of those things can be happy memories and some of those things can be bad memories. But it's the time I take to read those that takes away the time where nothing's going on in my life. And that's the important factor for me to continue. But I'm doing this, if you ever look at the very first blog, this was more to be about leaving something behind, and the questions aid with knowing what made me me, if you see what I mean. Otherwise I have to think about myself, what to talk about, you know, and sometimes that will be very difficult, because if I'm asked a question, it's almost like a dare. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I dare you to talk about this. And from that point of view, I can easily just turn around and say no, but for the most time it would be, well, why not? It's something that affected me. If I talk about it and it basically does good to somebody else that's listening, absolutely spot on. You couldn't ask for anything else. So those were the shout outs, and we'll now come to the questions. Like I say, not too many this time. So we start off with Rocket Bunny. He said he's got 2 questions for me this week. Thank you very much, first of all, Rocket Bunny. Have you seen the new Mistfall update for Valheim? Any thoughts? I'm considering giving it a go. Maybe finding someone to multiplayer with this time. So that's good, because I can see here that you know about the game and you've played it, because you say play it multiplayer this time. I must admit, Valheim came out the blue for me about a year ago, and looking at Steam, I think it said I'd put in 127 hours. I'll talk about that in a little bit, about these recording of hours. And they got to a point where they did this snow biome, right? What is Valheim, first of all? Right, it's a bit like Minecraft, but with a Norse Viking type element to it. You're dropped into a land, you've got next to nothing with you, you craft some items, you know, bows, axes, all that sort of stuff, try and get a home for yourself, because just like in Mindfall, at night all the creepy crawlers come out, start attacking you. But they added something called events to it. These are random events. Sometimes big trolls will come out of the forest for no reason whatsoever and home in on anything that's a structure, say. And therefore, if you didn't have enough defenses around your structure, you're going to get pummeled, and you'd have to rebuild it all again. And it's that sort of thing. It's open source, it's Minecraft, building, craft, all of that sort of stuff. And as I said, they started to do it as a world, and the last thing they did was a snow biome. But now they've moved into the biggest patch update last week, which is the Mistlands. I moved away from it about 6-7 months ago, and I've been meaning to go back to it. In fact, it was a consideration for me to start a server up, but I chose Minecraft because it was the cheapest, and it cost the price of a pint for people to invite people to say, hey, look, if you haven't played Minecraft for years, join us. We can build something together, whatever. didn't really take off. No, I don't know the reasons why. I put some time into it. I know that Robert definitely put some time into it, and wee Bob joined in as well, and I did a few things in there and had some fun, but the month came along and basically I didn't renew. And Valheim is a much more expensive server. I think it needs more RAM, needs faster processor, and if you've got a bunch of people that want to join in it, it's going to slow it down somewhat chronic. So I'm definitely interested in going back now that the Mistlands is now up. It invites you back into a game. You know, it's almost like a renewal. You go away, you come back, you got to learn it all again, and now there's all the new stuff. And there'll be similarities, like in this particular land, there will be dungeons, just like there were in the swampy biomes and the desert biomes and all of that sort of stuff. And all of those will have different creatures that you'll kill, and then you can make other things from that, and eventually you'll be able to build much bigger structures out of all sorts of different materials. So am I interested? You're damn right I am. The multiplayer, those side of things, unless you make your own server, it's costly. And anybody that wants to think about doing something like that, please join Mainmeister's Discord. There is an area in there talking about multiplayer aspects of games that we could possibly all join in. And if enough people said, yeah, I'm tempted to buy this game on Steam, come and join you all, I'm willing to put in a $5 towards the server, whatever, then of course we've got a way forward. If you don't, then of course you're just hearing me blab on about a game that I played a year ago. So there we are. Now, his second question. You've mentioned Guild Wars 1 and 2 a few times, and it's your most played multiplayer online game. Guild Wars 1 I played a lot with friends, and I used to do LAN parties. Good for you, brilliant. Back in the day. Later on, I only ever played Guild Wars 2 on my own, as none of my old friends were into it, and the focus was always World of Warcraft and so forth, for guilds, raiding, etc. What are your experiences playing Guild Wars 2? Did you belong to a big guild, raiding, player versus player? Interested to hear your more on your exploits. Yes. So my first foray into anything multiplayer was Guild Wars. And Guild Wars 1 was one that I was so taken aback by, and some people will recognize this trait in me, that I was so excited by it and I so wanted to play it with other people that I was buying copies for those people to see if they got excited about it, and then we could join in. And literally 9 times out of 10 they appreciated me buying it, but played it solo or didn't play it at all. And that's a great shame, because I try my best, to get myself out of the doldrums to play along with something. But this was back in the day, by the way, so I'm not talking about now. And I played that game so much, mostly single player, that I was part of the testing team for Guild Wars 2, and I was able to join the game a week before anybody else could actually join it, and that made me further ahead in the game, and that gave me probably much more of a possibility of joining guilds and so forth. Problem with that was that didn't happen. I did join a guild after about 7 months. They weren't into player versus player either. They wanted to do raiding in dungeons, doing quests that one person would find it incredibly difficult to do by themselves. And Guild Wars 2 really expanded upon the idea that everybody has to join in on certain events. There's no way. There was one where you had to kill dragon 3 times in 3 different areas, and you had literally 300 people all in this event together, firing blindly into this particle mess that was where this dragon sat on top of this mountain, for it only to then die, leave treasures behind, and you rushed all in to try and get that elite weapon or elite item. And great fun, but you could only uphold that interest for so long, and COVID came along and Brexit and all sorts of stuff that required my attention at work, and I moved away, and expansions came along to that game that confused the hell out of me, because I didn't know if I could join the new stories without finishing the old ones. Wiki and so forth didn't make it very clear and how that worked, and eventually with the guild dispersed, people moving away to, you know, life things, I never joined another guild. So I've tended to find most of my multiplayer role-playing game experiences outside of even Guild Wars, because I've played Elite and I've played Eve and a number of others. They've all started off with the best of intentions and ended up me just soloing, and that's a shame, because when you start considering doing this, you start buying things like headsets, you know, upgrading your equipment so that you don't find that your machine is the lowest common denominator on why you're not having so much fun as somebody else. So that's my experience, really. And even last night, I found the executionable still installed on my machine that I'm in front of now, and opened up Guild Wars. I had to go to my all sorts of different places to find my passwords, because I've got them now secure in various places, and it allowed me in, and it loaded, and literally the very first Guild Wars, dating that far back, there was no one around, but it all came back to me. You know, all of my stuff, my treasure was still there, my stash was still there. It's just nobody was there. It's like going into the precinct at 5 in the morning when all the shops are shut and nobody's walking around other than the cleaners. Very, very eerie. Guild Wars, yes, I'd like to go back to that. But again, I've not done things like Skyrim, and I've bought those games. It might be good to start something brand spanky new and join somebody that would be my mentor, rather than me doing something from scratch with someone, or me being the person that's been on it the most and teaching people how to play the game. Interesting aspects. Love to go back to that. And then he's put, crap. Okay, third question. Just thought of. Did you have any Black Friday game bargains? I had a few retro games. You finally got Vector Wars. That was a game that I did a little bit of a gameplay thing on. And 3 more of these Atari Recharged series on Xbox. So he's got an Xbox, and he bought the Recharged series that I bought on PC on Xbox. They're great for achievements, by the way, he says. I really like the Centipede one. Asteroids is my favourite so far, though. And yeah, you can have a look at my opinions of those Recharge games. They weren't totally for me. I had enjoyment out of them. There was one that I was totally disappointed with, which was Missile Command from memory. But I did like Black Widow. They've just released Yar's Revenge. Trouble is, that wasn't in the sale. But going back to, did I buy anything in the Black Friday sales? Well, I bought some pinball tables for the FX series rather than the other series of pinball tables that I've got. I haven't tried them yet. And I did buy a game. I've forgotten what it's called now. Oh, did I write it down? I'm not sure. Yes, it was called From Space, so I wrote it down. From Space, which is sort of like a real-time version of of XCOM, and I really enjoy it. It's more like a twin shooter. I'm sure you've seen them before. You've got an isometric type view, and it's a twin stick, and zombies are all coming at you. Well, it's aliens, and you can find people that are like NFCs. They're just computer generated characters that you'll meet, and they can join you, and they can be your wingmen, and you'll find items, and you can set up sentry points, a bit like the film Alien, lay down some guns that automatically fire with movement, all sorts of stuff. But I only got it on Friday, and I've played it once, because I just haven't had the time yet. But it's Sunday, so hey, might do that. And he wished me well, and thank you very much. Then we've got Jambon. Jambon didn't have really any question for me. He just talked a little bit about what we were talking about last week, about Steam being a community. Brilliant. And he's put not a question for the blog necessarily, but was wondering what you think of the game Bastion. I recently finished it on Switch, and I spotted it in your Steam library. I know it came out yonks ago, but I was struck by the similarities with Vampire Survivor. And I had to think about it, and I went, I remember buying that, and I looked, and I never loaded it, never tried it. I then looked at the videos that Steam show, the trailer that makes you buy the game, and oh my god, yeah, isn't it similar to Vampire Survivors? I think that's one that I think I'll try and get to go on in the next couple of weeks, because I do like those Vampire Survivors type games at the moment. But I think it's because the later ones that I've been playing have been more like the twin stick shooter that I liked of the old days, like Robotron. They're getting more towards it being less automatic and more about you aiming and firing and the choices that you make in the weapons. So he wished me all the best. Thank you very much, Jambon. And then we've got Denny. Now, Denny is a newish sort of like friend of mine. He's got his own channel. He's literally just done a video on Dig Dug for the Commodore 64 because it's been enhanced. They've sped up the gameplay by making the PAL version as fast as the NTSC version, and destroyed a few bugs and included a few enhancements. In his video, he's even got a download link for it because it's free, and absolutely brilliant. I always put people's links in my description. Definitely go and check that one out. And he has a question for me. What was your favourite part of the content from Guild Wars 1? Mine was 7 hero dungeon runs. So we just talked about Guild Wars just now. And yeah, you have to think really far back for Guild Wars 1, because if I was to put down the pros and cons between Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2, other than the obviously glossy finish that they put to a newer engine, the aspects of everything really came from Guild Wars 1, and I had immense fun with Guild Wars 1. It had a great story. Joining other people was obviously there. The leveling up system was easy to understand. And yes, I remember going into these dungeons, but Guild Wars 1 was a solo thing for me. I could even though I bought the game for people, I just couldn't find people to join in with me. I was a little bit backwards at coming forwards and just talking to somebody that was in one of the localized community areas. They go, oh, are you part of a guild? Oh, can I join? It never turned into something like that for me. And I think these guilds started off because they had possibly much more enthusiasm of people joining with them, and then people just migrated towards them until they had lots of people with them, and they set themselves up in their own little clans. And like I say, never really happened for me. So I do remember there were 7 hero dungeon runs. I loved the dungeon runs that were in Guild Wars. I found the first Guild Wars so much better. I hated these jumping puzzles that they added in, Guild Wars 1 was so new that you couldn't even jump. There was no jump mechanic in it. So really it was a vanilla role-playing game, really, but with pals, friends. But there was player versus player, and there was player versus environment. But I was mostly player versus environment. So there was capture the flag and all of that sort of stuff, but I never got involved with it. And so I have to say, it was going into these dungeons, killing the boss at the end, getting all of the treasure out of it, and trying it with all the different builds, you know, being an elementalist or being a knight or being, you know, there were necromancers, you know, there was all different traits, and trying them different ways. That was the plan. Thank you very much, Denny, for your question. Brilliant. And then we've got Milfy, good old Milfy. We love Milfy. Always comes out with interesting questions. So he's put question for the next blog. What, if anything, that you have collected or used to remember fondly from your past has gone out of fashion, but you would like to see a resurgence of, or perhaps even the opposite? The fact is, you're happy with just your memories and might think that the thing you love did come back, that it might tarnish the nostalgia you had for it. And yes, he's quite right. If you remember rightly, I was talking about a game and I said that Hover Bother would be probably nice to come back, but I also mentioned and said the danger is it could blemish my memory of it. So what have I collected, or do I fondly remember that's got to have fashion? Well, there was a time when I was living by myself in Manchester, I'll never forget it, that I had a couple of consoles. And although I didn't really know too many people, some people, like my next door neighbours, had children, and the next door neighbour would always come up to me and say, "Can you look after my kiddie for a bit? We're just going into town. We need to get something for Christmas. We don't want him to know about it, whatever." And when they came round, because I always had two, don't know what it is, I always had two joypads for every console I've ever got. It's no different with this PS5. I've got two joypads for that. He came round and we'd play racing games and play on fighting games and all of that sort of stuff. And I fondly remember how before, when I was his age, going round to my friends and we would sit in the same room and play games together. And although online has been an absolute wonderful thing for a lot of people, you're not sitting next to the person. You're not, the competitive bit is there by voice only, you know, or they might be a little camera in the corner with their face or something. So if there was anything that I missed from the past, it's possibly sitting down with a person and playing something rather than doing it online. I think online's got to the point where we're all just strangers. Doesn't matter how much you know someone, talk to someone on Discord, play with them on an online game. If you've never met them, wouldn't it be lovely to have them come round, have a cup of tea, have a chat, and then choose a game? You know, you got a big wad of discs and you open it up and you go, you choose one, and then have a little competition between yourself, or a drinking game or something. And the fun of all of that I think is what I miss, that I'd like to have back. Yeah, definitely. So I hope that's answered that, Milfy. And then the last one, Steve's Gaming. Like I say, very short this week. So he wishes me well and everything. And his first question is, would you ever consider playing another massively multiplayer online role-playing game, not counting Guild Wars 1 and 2? If so, which and why? And if not, then why not? So everything seems to be aiming towards online role-playing games today. Well, I've mentioned them before. I have played others. I've played Eve. I've played Elite. They've all tended to end up solo playing. And I've tended to veer towards the ones that cost nothing. So Guild Wars, once you've bought the product, costs you nothing. There is an element inside the game for you to buy things for your character, like there are in so many other games. But Guild Wars didn't emphasize it to the point where you have to buy this for you to get anywhere in the game. You could crawl it to the point where you could get that item as a drop, you know. So, and I think I've even mentioned that I might try Skyrim. If enough people want to join online and show me the ropes, that might be something that I'll try, because I've done the Morrowinds, don't get me wrong, but they were all, again, solo event, never playing online. And I think it's all down to what people have got installed, what's around, and what's exciting people at the moment. I don't think it's down to an individual to say, you've caused this problem yourself, because I've tried enough times to try getting people to join in on something, you know. It's just whether people want to, and whether they want me around. Might be if it was coming from somebody else's mouth, they'd join in it. Just because it's me, they won't. I don't know. That's a bad way of looking at something. Number 2. What unimportant and rather stupid tiny thing makes you rant and boils your blood? For me, it's people using could or would. And I understand that, yeah. People that use, I don't know, an emphasis on everything when actually it's not. I've hated the word from the very start in a conversation, whatever. You know, you're having a discussion, you've got to a stalemate, and the other person will throw that word in, whatever. And you go, well, where can I go with this now? And that just kills things dead. And it's such a, what's the word? Blasé word. A word that means absolutely nothing, and basically, because you don't want to, you've closed your mind off to you being wrong or right, you throw in a word that just kills it dead. Yeah, that makes my blood boil. I don't think there are many things really that do make my blood boil. I mean, there's aspects of my life that I'm not happy with, and there are things going on at work that should never have happened, and we all know about that. If you watch 39 other blogs, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I think people that hide behind policies, procedures, or have a two-facedness about them, makes my blood boil, because I've always been tried to be open. I've probably been a little bit too open in my past, and I've probably worn my heart on my sleeve far too many times. But I've always thought that I'm not playing a strategy game when I'm trying to befriend someone. I'm trying to be open up about what things have upset me, so that they know, so that they don't upset me in the future. I'd rather someone be honest to me and be a friend and know that we are therefore friends for life, because they know of the things that they need to steer away from, you know. So I've always probably sometimes mentioned something that other people have considered is a weakness to exploit later on. Yeah, I think if only I could do things differently, there'd be a number of things where I wouldn't have had you know, been taken advantage of, I think is the word. And that's the end, like I said. That's the shout-outs and the questions, and we're 40 minutes in, so we get to the stuff that I've watched. So just a number of things here. There seems to be a pattern here on what we're talking about. So that one was all about online role-playing games and stuff. This is more about history and celebration now. So what have I watched? This Week in Retro reached its 100th episode. See what I'm talking about? So they did a little celebration, and a few people come in saying what they'd like to see different in the next 100 episodes. And their topics this week were playing. This was interesting. You could take a version of Flight Simulator, like up to the latest version, I think, and you could have in the cockpit display one of the displays where you can play Flight Simulator 1 inside the Flight Simulator itself. Interesting. Would I want to do that? No. I do know that the way that they worded it is that the exciting bits of Flight Simulator are always the takeoff, the landing, and the boring bit generally is looking out into space as you're flying the thousands odd miles to get to the next airport. Somebody came up and said, why don't you put Flight Simulator 1 in the cockpit so that you can practice your takeoffs and landings while the boring bit's going on? I think I'd rather play Breakout. And that's from God knows how many years ago, but an interesting thing. And if somebody's gone and done that, hey, more power to their elbow. That was an interesting one for this week in retro. Reaching 100 episodes is something that everybody should be proud of. They've got a big community. I wish them well. The last couple of weeks have been better. They went into a doldrum for me, where there was just items that there was nothing for me to really grind my teeth with. So I found it a little bit, blasé, Anyway, but Neil's crew, brilliant. Watch that, and I do watch it religiously. Techmoan. Now, I've talked about Techmoan, and I don't think a lot of people watch him, but I do. And he did a little bit of a retrospective of something called a Micro MV Camcorder. Now, this was a camcorder that fitted between the middle ground. So you had these very cheap camcorders that cost nothing. And you had the really expensive professional ones that cost an absolute earth, but they were bulky bits of equipment. And Sony brought out the Micro MV Camcorder, which was no bigger than a Walkman, but could do some of the higher end functionality, but was cheap enough for you to buy it for the people that are buying cheap camcorders. Of course, this all means nothing now because we can do everything on our phones. But back then, they had to invent a whole new tape to go into this camcorder because it was no bigger than a Walkman. So they used a tape no bigger than those answering machine tapes, in fact smaller than that, and you could fit 60 minutes of footage on it. And the reason you could do it is they invented a new mechanism to go around the tape, and MPEG-2 had just come round, so compression was there. Very, very interesting if you watch it, because you'll go, wow. And the thing about it is it only lasted 3 years, and the reason it failed was the professionals disregarded it. No, not powerful enough. The people that were buying the cheap ones still found it a little bit too out of reach. We're talking about a camcorder that would cost, I don't know, £800 to £1,000. These camcorders that people were buying were in the 400s, but they had those big VHS tapes in them, and you know what it's like. The quality is poor. People took them for holidays and then they stored them away until they went on the next holiday. So it was a niche item that failed after 3 years. Shame, but it's interesting to watch. And then LGR, I watched him this week. He was unboxing a Dreamcast that he'd bought and he never opened. And he bought this years ago. So he's played Dreamcast and emulation before. He's had other Dreamcasts that he's bought, but never one where at the time that I think it came out. And this one has been left in the box. So he took it out and got great pleasure of taking out all of his Dreamcast games and trying them out. He got a VM unit out. He got a Rumble Pack out. He talked about the things that really pigged him off, which was cable tidying for that particular device and the batteries for the VM unit and for the internal clock of the system itself. But he ended up really with a very positive review of a console that is very sadly missed, and I miss it. Excuse me. So that's definitely worth a watch. Then my friend Movie Collector, who I email and comment on every week, he did a retrospective of Star Trek The Motion Picture. I think it's because people like me have turned around to him and said, you keep avoiding this one film, why? So he finally bit the bullet, went out and bought it, and did a retrospective, and it's great to watch. And then very, very late, yesterday, Retro Recipes. Now, I don't watch him or his crew of people very often, but he is entertaining. And this week it was more about, he wanted to get the 80s back into now, in the 2022s. And he decided to blank off one wall and paint it in two different ways. One to make it look like his downstairs when he had an Apple II that his dad bought, and one to look like his upstairs in his bedroom where he had his Commodore 64. And he even assembled furniture to go on it based on his memories and the pictures that he's got. So he put these posters of the time up on the wall, the picture that used to be hanging above his Apple II because it was in the living room, so it wasn't have been posters. And even buying things like the tape caddies that he used to put his tapes in for the games that he was playing. And went to the point of buying the monitors that would have been the exact same monitor that he would have used on the Apple rather than one that's similar. Hey, this guy's got money. That's all I can say. I think that's probably what puts me off the most, because I've looked at his videos and he lives in a very big house in, I think, California. He's got a swimming pool. He's got a couple of SX64s that he's done up. He can not waste money, but spend money doing up a side of a wall and reenacting what it looked like in his bedroom, so that when he's doing his reviews, he can sit at that desk and have his mind in a place that would have been similar to where he was in the 80s. Well, that's great. I've got no money to do that, no space. I wish I had the time, the effort, a channel that was big enough that was donating and all that to do that. But even so, if you've got money, great. If you want to do that and entertain us, brilliant. Is this a bit of FOMO, fear of missing out, or jealousy? No, not really, because I think if I wanted to do my room up like the 80s, I would, and I could. But I wouldn't go to the extent that he has, because I'd need money to do that. And I don't have a big enough base for me to make it worthwhile. But I also think to myself, I only want to go back to the 80s when my mind wants me to, because it's a warm, fuzzy, familiar place for me to go to that cheers me up. I should be looking forward and going, what am I doing tomorrow? What's going to excite me about making tomorrow happen? And I should be reminiscing only when my mind wants downtime. To have it in my face, all around me, I think it could become something very unhealthy. Because if you're always looking back, when are you looking forwards? Interesting. And then we come to the stuff that I've watched of yours. So we start off with Rabbit. He did a couple of videos. There's a new game that he's just bought called Straw Bee. I think it's supposed to be Strawberry, but Straw Bee. Looked a very interesting puzzle type game. He was playing something similar on, I think, a Game Gear. And this programmer wrote back to him and said, I'm writing a similar game. Would you like to see it? And it's turned into a full game that you can buy. Great when something like that happens, when a programmer comes up to you and basically says, do you want to see this? And then it develops into a full game. Brilliant. That was a great video. And then he tried out some whiskey. It was a gold whiskey. I think it was like a miniature in a gold container. And I believe he's got, and I need to check this because I haven't looked so much at Rabbit stuff, that he's got lots of videos on whiskey. Now, I used to be a whiskey drinker. I was a passionate whiskey drinker. And I think I've talked about my two favourites, which are Lefroy and Dunwinnie. I had one Dunwinnie that was 40 years old, and it cost, I think it was like £40 a shot. And that was an event at work. And this guy bought the bottle, and it was thousands of pounds. And we all were able to have a shot of it. But that's neither here nor there. That's an interesting one. just so that you can see the packaging and what other whiskies are available. I mean, I haven't looked at whiskey in a long time. And then he played. He's just recently bought the Atari 50th Celebration game package, which is like a museum and a game package in one. And he was playing Asteroids on it because he'd never played I think it was the 7200 version. Was it the 5200? I can't remember. Certainly one of those. And it was great. Now, Robert. So we move on to Robert now, who I used to call production line Robert. Did something very strange where I was included for such a long time since my name's been mentioned. But he'd got to Spider-Man on the Atari 2600. And this was a lovely thing to watch because I've still got that game, but I haven't got an Atari VCS or 2600 anymore. But I've still got the box, the cartridge for Spider-Man on the Atari 2600. And I know it's got an awful reputation. If I've ever talked about that game, people have turned around and said, "You played that shit back then?" Awful. It's not awful at all. It's just, the like anything back in the day, we experimented with different mechanisms to make the game work. You know, in this particular game, Spider-Man doesn't climb or walk up a wall. He has to use his web, and his web will only attach to concrete, and he's going up a skyscraper with windows, and if he misses the concrete part, then he'll fall, etc, etc, etc. Definitely watch that. I sent him a link from a video I saw many years ago of the programmer talking about how they wrote that game. I hope he got great enjoyment out of that. And of course, this week for him, he did his 2 to the power of 7 celebration. So he hasn't reached a milestone like 250 or whatever. It's 2 to the power of 7. Do the math, you'll work it out. And I wished him well. It's great to see someone who started off a little bit after me doing his bit and expanding exponentially like he is. And I can only, wish him well and be very, very proud that I was even mentioned at the beginning when his channel started, because I think he got inspiration from Steve, and Steve mentioned me as the inspiration for him starting something up. So we all sort of like started at the same time. And that leads me into Steve, because he is one away from 150 subs, which I reminded him of yesterday. And he's not been very well. I know that one of the problems he's got is he's had a tooth removed and he's in pain. And I didn't understand that, because I always thought his teeth were false. I thought he was that old that he used Sterident to clean his teeth. But no, apparently he's got his own teeth. Well done, Steve. And you're one away from 150 subs. Well, I'm very proud for you. Thank you very much. And no, but he's done a couple of videos this week. Definitely go and watch them. I think one was Lock and Bolt for the Commodore 64, and the other one was an Atari, not Capture the Flag, but King of the Castle, which was very entertaining because he died a lot. I like seeing him die. It's not that I'm morbid. It's just that I love torture games. I love games where people have loaded it up for the first time, know nothing about it. They play it, trying to work it out while explaining and playing the game, and they die and die and die. And you've worked it out in your head how it works. And you're shouting at the screen, "No, go left, you nonce!" Great, love all that. And then I've mentioned Denny and his Dig Dug enhanced version. Definitely go and see that. That was interesting. And then Ponder, good old Ponder. Great for him. He became second in the Mainmeister high score kerfuffle. The person who came first was very magnanimous in winning, and basically gave the rights of the next game to play to Ponder because he'd done so well for the whole of the 10-game season. So he chose Tempest, and it was any excuse to get out his new controller. We've had enough of those jokes, Ponder, so I'm not going to mention the word that you use, but you like playing with your, yeah. So he got his new controller out, and he gave us a very entertaining video of Tempest and how far that he'd gotten with it. And Tempest is a game that I love, so that was brilliant. And then what I've watched on TV, well, I'm catching up with Andor, and it keeps going forward, and I think we're up to episode 12 now. This is one of those ones where I'm a little bit behind the lead, if you see what I mean, in the fact that I haven't even looked to see how many episodes are in this season. Right, there could be 20 something. I thought I was, when I'd first watched the first 4 episodes, I'd watched it, and then it went up to episode 8, and then now it's up to 12. I'm loving it. The best episode I've seen so far has been episode 3, if anybody wants to know. But there's a reason why episode 3 does it for me, and that was when I got hooked, although it was a good story in the first 2. But the third one was more about loss and why we're doing things. Why am I here? What's happening? And where are we going? So it was sort of like that crossroads episode where it's all going to be explained in the next 10 or so episodes or whatever. So episode 3, I think, did it for me. And that was the reason why. I think, like anybody, if you're into the football, you're having a fantastic time. I'm not that into football, but my mother is very happy because she'll watch the English game. So she'll watch Wales, she'll watch England. You know, if there was more of us in this World Cup, she'd have been watching Ireland and Scotland. My mother's very, if not anything, British Isles. You know, United Kingdom, not diversified England. And I'm sort of similar. But I have to say, this World Cup, I really am not passionate about looking at any other game. How America's doing, how Ecuador's doing. No, I couldn't care less. And the news seems to be not about the results in the games. It's all about politics, which turns me off. So, for those that are looking at the football, great. I am following England. Come on, England. I know we can do it. You did absolutely useless on Friday, but I know you'll pull it back. But I don't want hurt anymore. And then the other thing that I watched is that there was a very interesting live stream of Elton John's final concert ever in America, because he's doing this big long tour. And he's finally said, look, I'm in my, I don't know, is he in his 70s now? I'm in my 70s, approaching my 80s. I've got 2 kiddies. I'm touring all the time. And at some point, I've got to say, stop the tour. And he ended up at Dodger Stadium, which is a very famous stadium for him to play at, because he filled it out in 1975. He's been there a couple of times. And anyway, he did a 2.5 hour to 3 hour set. Now that's a heck of a lot for a guy of that age, right? That's first of all. Second thing, I haven't really talked about who my number 1 pop artist or whatever it is, but it is Elton John. Just to put the record straight now. I've got all his albums. I've been to a lot of his concerts. I've read his books, his autobiography. And the reason for that is that I started to learn piano. And when anybody starts to learn piano, depending on the age that you start, you catch on to somebody. And it could have been Billy Joel. It could have been Freddie Mercury. You know what I'm talking about. And it just happened to be Elton John. Now, I don't care he's gay. I don't care that he's a stroppy individual person that's impossible to be around, whatever. I've actually met him, and I've talked about that in my streams. I had a piano lesson from him. I won a competition in 2005 at a concert, and that was the last concert I went to see him at Vicarage Road. And I've got the cat back there. And politest, nicest guy. Asked me about what my experience is with the piano. Didn't go over the top. Told me about what was important for him when he's playing. He does this rocking motion, just so you know. So if you ever hear him play, you'll know that he does a chord, but then he can rock between the chord by using two of the notes and then the thumb for the main note to move the song forward. I could go on with diminished fifths and all sorts of stuff, but I won't bore you with all of that. But so anyway, this broadcast went out. I watched it all the way through. Very sentimental at the end. Lots of celebrities saying thanks for being our friend at the beginning. And he now moves forward into Europe and other areas to where he finishes, I think, at the end of next year. And that will be him done for tourists. Now, the thing I think about with this is that the end of Elton John? Of course it's not. There's never an end. It's just what he's saying is, I don't want to do 80,000 stadium tours. I want to do little things. I want to be able to go into a recording studio and do something. I want to do a duo with someone. I want to join somebody on stage that's also doing that type of stadium. One-offs. I want to do a little, very small set in a club somewhere. Something he's never been able to do since 1969. Do you know what I mean? Good for you, Elton. Really enjoyed it. So this week, what have I done? So I did a gaming history of 1987's Wonder Boy. Now, just to get something straight with this one, but it has got the lowest numbers so far for me doing these they take me about 2.5 days to do. But this was supposed to be a gaming history for me, but when I think about that particular year, I had to think about my friend who died this year. So of course, something is always not going to be about me, but it will be my history. And this one was more history than my gaming history. And so I filled in an awful lot of things that were going around at that time and put in a lot of things that were affecting me. But it was more about the game that my friend loved and the experience I had with him loving that game. You get it? That sort of thing. Also, I just want to mention that this gaming history is not just going to be 1 year, here's one game and I'm never going to go back to that year. It will be not just on arcades, it will be Commodore 64 stuff, VIC-20 stuff, ZX81 stuff. You know, the Pet Invaders might even be in there. It's my history. That's it. That's the whole crux. So, and then of course I did my blog last week, which was the longest blog I ever did. To be quite honest, it surprised me. And then we've got the answer. Now remember, I always give a couple of questions at the end of the blog. And what they were last week was, what was the first video game played in space? And what does the word Atari mean in Japanese? A couple of you got at least one right. Like I said, there weren't that many comments, so I can't really talk too much about it. But the first game played in space should have been an easy one because it's either going to be Americans or Russians. And in this particular instance, it was a Russian astronaut that was on his way to the Mir space station in 1993, I think it was. And he took his Game Boy up and played Tetris. I couldn't get any more Russian. And how are you going to take your PS, you know, your big computer systems and monitors up to space with you? No. It was a handheld. And I'm surprised he didn't get reprimanded for the pounds and pounds of fuel that were required for him to get him into space while he was holding a 75-gram Game Boy. But that was an interesting question, and most people got that one right. Although I think a couple didn't understand the question because they were mentioning what game is in space. You know what I mean? Not what was the first game played in space. So what does the word Atari mean in Japanese? Now I had to look this up and I thought it was interesting. It stands for prepare to be attacked. I thought, wow, to have a company symbol and the word name Atari and have it mean prepare to be attacked. Great. That's, I thought, was a wonderful name. My God, that was great. And then lastly, the games that I played. So I've already mentioned From Space. Jambon mentioned a game that he said was in my library that he's played and finished, called Blazing Beaks. As soon as he mentioned that in his comment, I went and loaded that up, played it, and I love it. It's actually really good. It's one of those pixel art type, rough around the edges, graphic type games, but it's like Robotron again. But it's a dungeon crawler sort of thing, but with animals, you know, ducks and parrots and things. And you've got a gun, and you have to kill these creatures in this jungle before you go into the dungeons and so forth. And anything that drops, you then take as an artifact to your science pal, who then gives you better weapons to be able to go deeper into this dungeon type thing. Really gotten into it, but I'm absolutely hopeless at it. I think I've done about 5 screens and then all my lives are dead. But if you can imagine it, it's not like Vampire Survivors and all of that we've been talking about. And it's not Tiny Robotron, because there are lots of the terrain doesn't allow for it. You hide behind boxes, take it like that. You blow up foliage to find things that are in. I'm not explaining it very well, but I'm not sure of the price. If it's in a Black Friday sale, definitely get it. If it's a couple of quid, definitely get it. If it's in its 7 or 8 quid, watch a few videos. But enjoyed that, great. And then of course I played Rogue Genesia, you know, a couple of times this week, and that's been pretty much it. And no real things to show you because, like I said, there's been a disruption. I will say this: Discord is so handy to me that I hadn't bought much in the Black Friday sale, and I've been thinking about this for a long time and maybe capturing some game footage from things like my handhelds or my consoles at some point. So I asked about video pass-throughs, you know, that can capture, and they mentioned this one to me. I don't know if I can come up with it. So Micro Box 4K pass-through. It arrived. It wasn't in the sale, disappointingly, but I still bought it. And I did this for the first time without looking for a review. I wanted to know what my friends are using, and I did ask the question, if you had the time again, would you have bought something different? They all came back saying, never had a problem with this, absolutely great, get it. So I did. This is where I want people to know that I respect what people are telling me, and they've got more background on this than I have, and I didn't want to look myself and then choose a different device. So it arrived literally yesterday at 6 o'clock at night. I've only took it out of the packaging, and I'm going to look forward to setting that up. And the only other thing I talked about in another Discord channel, films that aren't talked about too much by well-known directors, and Starman came up. Now, Starman is a John Carpenter film, and if anybody knows, you know, and has seen The Thing and Halloween and all of those, Assault on Precinct 13 and all of those films, you'll know that he does things on a budget. And he did this film called Starman with Karen Allen. Karen Allen from the Indiana Jones films. So fresh off of doing the first Indiana Jones films, she's moved into a sort of like a mid to low range budget film called Starman. I've got it here in front of you. There it is, Starman. Jeff Bridges. And I was talking last week about Movie Drome, and Starman is the first time I'd watched Starman was on a Movie Drome episode with Alex Cox. And I looked and I found it in my collection unopened, but it's showing on the Sci-Fi Channel at the moment. And I've got the score to it as well. And it brought back so many memories watching it. This score is great. It's like a church organ theme, very emotional. It's a very road trip type movie. All this alien wants to do is get home. But before he does that, he brings back something for Karen Allen's character. I won't spoil it for you. If you've got time, watch it. So that's the end. No questions, no topics. I wish for everybody to have a great week. Maybe there'll be some topics and questions next week if enough people prompt me to think about something. But I couldn't, all this weekend I was thinking and I just couldn't think of something. There was nothing that inspired me enough to go off in another direction. And but that's me, and I'll let you have the rest of your Sunday back to you, and I hope to see you all next week. And there'll be more news then. Till then, bye-bye.